um, stakeholder involvement. And so participatory research is, gaining momentum, and people are starting to see how useful it can be. And I think taking that from other areas outside of mental health, outside of health, the engagement and understanding of the groups in which you're targeting can have, substantial rewards to whatever it is that you're trying to work on. So I think that's one thing. And human-centered design or design thinking is something that is still relatively new within global mental health, in global health as well, but it's I'd say over the last 5 years or so, it's becoming more understood. And people don't necessarily see it as, oh, you're just trying to do something that you have no idea about. I think earlier on, when I was first writing grants using these sorts of methods, I would get peer reviews saying, but what's the intervention? I'd say, well, I don't know. That's the whole point, is that my point is that we shouldn't go into a setting already saying that this is your problem and this is what we're going to be doing. Because, really it needs to be something that is worked out with a community and led by a community in order to have any sort of kind of progress or success. And that's particularly important within mental health because of the contextual and cultural aspects that are intertwined with mental health disorder, mental disorders, and also diagnostic criteria, all of these things. There's such a huge influence of culture and context to the way in which people think about what might be symptoms of mental health problems. So it really lends itself to having this partnership and this understanding of those people who would be integral to the receipt or the delivery of an intervention. Then I think there's been much more kind of focus on implementation science in particular, and that's becoming really important as people start to think that actually we shouldn't be thinking about how this gets integrated into the real world after we've already designed and developed an intervention. We should really start thinking about it beforehand so that those sorts of things can be integrated into that development process. And so pulling these sorts of things together, I think, is a way in which we can start to understand and potentially identify things that will be helpful. I'm not saying that the way that we're doing this is the only way or the best way. We have no idea. We're trying this out and it's all a bit new, and there will be failures and hopefully there will be successes as well. But it's as much of a journey and understanding this whole process as it is in whatever the end result is. But I'm a firm believer that if we kind of are inclusive, if we take the time to actually teach each other about what we're doing. So it's not just, here, come in stakeholders, we're doing these sorts of things, we're facilitating and helping, but you can't do that unless they actually understand these processes as well and what happens. And so there's an element of capacity building, which is vital to the success of this in the development of the intervention, but also when the researchers step away, you need to make sure that the people on the ground actually understand how this works so that they can take it on, and that these interventions aren't static, stiff interventions, but they're flexible and fluid so that we can say, oh, this isn't working right now. So can the people on the ground then try to figure out, is it because of the content? Is it because there's been a shift somewhere else in the system that has made it either irrelevant or ineffective? And what can you do to rectify that? So it shouldn't be that the researchers have to be called in again to sort this out, but really, if we can build capacity along the way, then that gives people the tools to deal with this and not potentially just carry on with an intervention that is ineffective or is wasteful of money, but really thinking about, well, how can we make sure that this is always giving us the outputs and the outcomes that we want? Um, and so I think that there is that kind of difference. I know with a lot of kind of early career and mid-level career researchers that I talk to, there's also this kind of interest that it's not just research for research's sake. The last thing I want to do is to do something and then just have it sit in a journal. Well, I guess I do this like it's a journal on a shelf, but even now it's not really a journal on a shelf. So it's like in the ether, that just sits there and, a handful of people will see. But really thinking about how do we make sure that this is sustainable? If it's effective, then we need to think about how are we going to make sure that this has, a plan for implementation and a plan for sustainability after the fact. And I know that this is something that a lot of researchers are thinking about now. And I think that's a bit of a shift in this whole thing, that you've got researchers that are interested in kind of the scientific aspect of it, but also in that practical application. And so hopefully, this is a marker with this project and lots of others that are going on right now of this shift about how we think about how we develop interventions, and also how we conduct research and make sure that it's actually something that leads to greater progress, and not just, fodder for intellectual kind of curiosity.